we have a great group of experts here, and this is your opportunity to pick their brains. We've got Andrew Gertner of Arcade Tongue, Joe Gates of Beazley Group, Ron Connolly of DP Solutions, and Sean Roberts of Arctic Wolf. And I'm going to have each of them talk a little bit about their background and their company and start us off.
I am Andrew Gertner. I'm the president at Arcade Tongue. We're an insurance agency and brokerage on the other side of the Beltway from here, up in Nottingham. We evacuated from Baltimore City after being there for over 100 years. Probably no explanation needed for that. So as an insurance broker, my job today is to fearmonger, right? That's what we do. And then everybody else is going to save the day, so buckle up. So the story, in April 2020, and if we think back to what was happening around that time in 2020, it was a boring time. There was nothing going on, right? Like March was just humdrum, doldrums of late winter, early spring, right? So in April of 2020, the network of a now defunct IT managed service provider was breached. Cyber criminals used the information obtained from the breach to access the networks and encrypt the data of approximately 80 businesses in the DMV region. The criminals offered, generous of them, to sell decryption keys to the affected businesses, depending on which one, for anywhere from $40,000 to $80,000 per server, payable in Bitcoin. Nearly all breach victims were subject to the elevated care standards imposed by HIPAA and HITECH. And many of the impacted businesses had previously purchased breach response or cyber insurance of some type, but many had not. And so, again, being the age that I am and the bald that I am, like if somebody said, hey, go purchase some Bitcoin and pay it out as a ransom, by show of hands, who would be like, oh, I know how to do that? Good, so that tracks, right? Like, thank you for being my people. Oof, this is impossible. So what we tried to do here is we took some screen caps and we redacted the names of the innocent for their protection. But this is a copy of the actual email that was sent to obtain the ransom. It says a lot of letters and digits, and I assume that's probably some sort of like a Bitcoin wallet address that it would have to go to. And the good guys who are trying to make this better said something to the effect of, thank you. I know we have a tight budget, so are you able to help us out at all? The executives had agreed on $26,000, which I know isn't a lot, but given our circumstances, they were able to agree upon that. So what we're looking at here is essentially a negotiation, right? It's like, hey, I know you want 40 grand, would you take 26? And the response was no later than Monday. So that's pleasant, right? And so I guess the moral of this story is you would have to know, or you'd have to have people that know how to respond to something like this. We've already determined that basically none of us in this room even know how to pay this ransom, let alone unwind all of the other stuff. And so in comes your fear-mongering insurance broker friend, who can kind of show you what is the continuum of options available to you if you're a business owner and you're confronted with this situation. By the way, we have to do this before the breach event happens, right? Like you can't buy insurance on houses currently ablaze. So on this continuum, you've got anywhere when you're talking about cyber insurance from just a source of funds and a limited source of money at that, where basically if you have somebody that's breached your network, they're like, well, sorry about your luck, submit us a bill, here's some money. You're on your own. And that's sort of at one end of the spectrum. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you can get something that really gives you a comprehensive breach response toolkit. So everything from forensics to attorneys to negotiate to all sorts of different cyber professionals to hopefully unwind this. And then obviously the money to pay them all, as well as potentially a ransom in this example, or whatever the case might be. And so embedded within this, this continuum of insurance options, you've got all of these various things that are, I've kind of indicated as checkboxes in what could be a cyber insurance option for you. And so not all have all of these. Some have some. Others have basically none, except the bucket of money that we talked about. And so you can either become an expert in cyber insurance and breach responses, or you can find an insurance broker. Clearly you wouldn't want that to be our firm. We're just here for our health and because you know, we like eggs too. But nevertheless, what do we do, and why would you work with any broker for this particular type of insurance? So I'm not going to read them all to you, but the gist of this is that we have certain roles and responsibilities that we're going to fulfill as brokers for you. And you know, that's fairly well structured when done right. You can see them on the screen. Again, won't read them to you. But more importantly is like, why any firm? Why not, you know, the people that sold you your auto insurance? Like, and this is niche, right? This is very specialized. This is the type of thing. I am not an IT professional, nor do I profess to be. Sarah, our director of operations, will tell you very clearly that I have no business advising you on your IT needs. That's why this is a panel and not the Gerner Show. But what you do want is you want people with specific industry vertical experience. So if there's an automobile manufacturer in this room, I can tell you I don't know a ton about doing cyber for automobile manufacturers. And nor does really anybody in our firm. We could probably learn it, but we're not going to show up on day one and be like, here's what you need to do. Professional services, government contracting, you know, that sort of stuff, yeah, that's like wash, rinse, repeat type stuff for us. You want specific insurance experience. Again, it's probably not the person that sold you your automobile insurance. It's very different skill set and expertise. You want broad and deep market access. You don't want somebody that represents a company, because guess what? To a hammer, everything's a nail. You want a broker that's got broad ability to access various markets for you. You would like to have significant networks and relationships, because sometimes the broker's going to be in a position, depending on which of that continuum of insurance options you selected, to be like, hey, you've got the bucket of money option, you got everything else taken care of? And oftentimes the answer will be no. And so we say, well, look at this panel we know. What a nice relationship and network of professionals to help you out with. And then, of course, you want a customer experience orientation. You want people that answer the phone, human beings. You prefer not a call center, because the call center is probably where the hack came from to begin with, if we're being honest. And so that's sort of where we would differentiate why we sit on a panel like this today. And that's the closest we're going to get to a commercial, but I figured the education might be worthwhile.
I am Joe Gates. I'm with a company called Beazley, so we are an insurance carrier. Now, many of you probably have not heard of Beazley. Beazley is not a household name, so if you think about the insurance companies that you do know, Geico, Travelers, Progressive, the companies that can advertise, Beazley is not a direct writer, so we don't advertise because you couldn't call us and get insurance. We need licensed professionals who can sell you the insurance. The reason for that is because I will sit here and I will tell you Beazley is the best insurance company that you can ever use. But you need Andrew to actually tell you the truth and say Beazley's great for certain companies, not for other companies. That's again why you need that licensed professional, right? So what I do is I represent Beazley. We are a specialist firm. We only write lines of business that we can do profitably. So that's what we do, is we choose little niches that other companies don't want to write, things that are new, and cyber insurance is one of those. So cyber insurance has not been around very long. You think about, like Andrew said, your home insurance. Property insurance is one of the first types of insurance that was invented. Cyber is brand new. Cyber is also very confusing because everybody does so much with computers, they just think, well, that must be a cyber insurance claim because it was on the computer. So I do a lot of this education where I go around and I explain to people why you need cyber insurance, what it's for. Usually I have to do the fear mongering, so thank you for doing that for me. So now I just get to be the one who comes in and helps, right? So he told you how scary it is, what's involved, and I can tell you a little bit about why the policy is good. So when we talked about what we wanted to discuss, what they wanted me to kind of cover was, often we hear with insurance regarding cyber is, we don't need that because we're a small company, things like that. So for years, when we discussed cyber, what we would say is the only businesses that need cyber insurance are those with customers or employees. And that's because for a long time, cyber insurance dealt with sensitive information, or what we call PII or PHI, personally identifiable information or protected health information. So the early buyers, Andrew alluded to HIPAA and high tech, so a lot of healthcare industries bought it very quickly because they had additional regulations that required them to protect that information. So in the early days, cyber was all about sensitive information. That was what everybody's concerned with, was the loss of that information. And so we would often hear from companies that don't have a lot of information or don't do business over the internet, well, we don't need it. But even those companies have employee information that they could be storing, right? But in the last few years, that has changed. And now any company that uses a computer and relies upon that computer to do their business needs insurance. And what happened was the rise of what's called ransomware. So ransomware was one of the things that Andrew was talking about. It's a type of malware that can encrypt your computer for you, and then you have to pay to get a key to decrypt it. So for years, again, when cyber insurance was mainly sensitive information, a manufacturer wouldn't necessarily have a reason to buy cyber insurance because they don't have a lot of employees, they don't sell directly to consumers, but a manufacturing plant is often very computerized. So you think about what is it that you're doing, and if you rely upon your computers and that computer was locked up in a ransomware event, then you would have a business interruption loss. You might have to pay a large ransom. And the 2020 information that he was giving you about the cost of decrypting the key, and he said, I think it was $20,000, $40,000, depending upon the size of the business, we've seen those demands up to $6 million. So those are increasing, and one of the things that we're learning, and kind of like the way we, Beazley, knew we had hit the big time, the threat actors go into when they gain access to the network, they go into the email and they search for cyber insurance. And we've actually had the forensics companies uncover where they've searched for Beazley specifically. So we're like, oh great, we're well known by the threat actors. They're actually looking for us. And interesting story, so the head of underwriting from my team actually received an email the other day from someone purporting to be a threat actor saying, your insured had a breach, we hacked their system, and they haven't reported it to the government, so we would like you, their insurance carrier, to call them and tell them they need to report it to the government because that's what's required, and then we'd like to get paid for that. The reality was we did not insure them, we had sent them a quote 3 years before. But the threat actor had found that quote within the email and thought that we were the insurance carrier. So, rise of ransomware, now it's not just do you have sensitive information, do you collect credit cards, do you have people's names, phone numbers. Now it's anybody who's relying upon a computer could possibly have a need for this coverage. Why? So one of the things that Andrew mentioned was, kind of going through the process of what happens in the event of an incident. And one of the things that I tell people, whether you buy insurance from Beazley or buy insurance from another carrier, one of the benefits that you get is they've been through this before. Hopefully, this will be the first time that the business had an incident, but the insurance company has been through this before and can kind of help navigate you through the steps. And then insurance, or risk management terms, insurance is a form of risk transfer. Obviously, the benefit of having the insurance carrier there to pay the losses is great. But what most, Beazley's policy form, when we created it, the idea behind it is we have what's called a breach response services team. That's kind of a quarterback, if you like sports analogies, concierge, if you like high-end hotels, who walks you through that process, kind of holds your hand all the way through. Because what we found was what most businesses were concerned about was, yeah, financial loss is bad, but most of it was we don't know what to do. When this happens, when we have an incident, who do we call? as Andrew said, how do we get Bitcoin? What are the steps in the process? And I'll give you an example. There was a hospital that was doing a disaster recovery drill. They set up laptops around the ER, and the idea was, in the event of some sort of incident where we lost power, could we still access patient files? So the idea was they were going to send all the patient files down to these laptops, which could run on batteries for several hours. Set 20 laptops up around the hospital ER. At the end of the drill, they went and they collected them, and there were only 19. Somebody had stolen one of the laptops. So the hospital then says, well, we've had a data breach. So they go and they call a press conference and say, we've had a data breach. 100,000 patient files have been accessed. We'll notify you if you were affected. Then they call on the forensics team, who looks at the security cameras and sees that the computer was stolen the night before the test. Then they check the files and they see that only 19 of the 20 computers actually pinged back and said the download was complete. So the laptop that was stolen was blank. So then they went back and they called a press conference and said, we didn't have a data breach. The laptop was blank. So what do you think happened? Everybody who sees that's going to think either they're covering it up, they're lying, or they're inept. Either way, it is a serious public relations issue for that hospital system. So part of the process is having somebody there to walk you through the steps and tell you, hey, let's do forensics before we call a press conference and tell people what we've lost, right? So the benefit of having somebody who's there to walk you through that process and get you through it. And then additional risk management tools. So one of the things that's become very important, and again, like Andrew, I am not an IT professional. We will have people who know more about IT speak. But I have a feeling that they would agree with me if I said that no matter how good the IT is, humans are always the weakest link, right? So one of the things that's available with many insurance carriers is additional risk management tools, such as online training, webinars that can educate people on these exposures and help prevent them from doing things that will get around the great security systems that are in place, right? Another example of a data breach that probably had great security controls in place, but at the Texas Comptroller's office, which had a record of all state employees that had work comp claims in the last X number of years. Somebody dragged and dropped it in the wrong folder, and instead of being inside their network, it was posted on their website for several months. So for several months on the website, a list of names, social security numbers, the diagnosis of whatever they had, all on the website, available for 3 or 4 months. Again, wasn't any IT issue, it was a human putting it in the wrong place. So additional risk management tools nowadays, the most important thing with ransomware is getting employees to learn not to click on links. Again, my company, we do a lot of cyber insurance. You would be amazed how many cyber underwriters click on those links when we do our own internal phishing trainings. It's embarrassing. I have not fallen for it, but we have one who's actually fallen for it twice.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How has the underwriting changed since you guys have evolved into cyber insurance, since ransomware has gone up? It used to be as simple as, hey, send us Excel spreadsheet, fill it out. What are you guys requiring now to get customers?
That is actually the next slide. After this one, so really quickly, I'll come back to that. This one is just kind of showing the simplified view of a data breach, and this is just showing that whole concept of the process and following it correctly. So you'll see here, we start with the discovery of an incident, theft, loss, or unauthorized disclosure of personally identifiable information. Then you do the evaluation. That's when forensics and legal come in. And then you'll see on there, these are called incidents, and that's because a breach has legal implications. So until it has been determined by either a forensic professional or an attorney to be a breach, it is always referred to as an incident. Because the moment you write, hey, we've had a breach, that begins the clock for when you have to do certain things. So it's always an incident until somebody who knows what they're doing comes in and says, yes, this is a breach. Then the idea behind the Beazley policy is the managing the short-term crisis. So we walk you through the process of handling those things correctly to avoid the long-term consequences. So notification and credit monitoring, if it is in fact the loss of sensitive information. That helps minimize the class action lawsuits and the regulatory fines and penalties that can come from not notifying in a timely manner. The public relations helps minimize the reputational damage and the income loss. It's now been a very long time ago, but the Target data breach, 2012, I had 2 credit cards that were affected because my wife loves Target. The moment we got those credit cards replaced, she was right back at Target because we got an email from them saying, if you have any liability for your credit card, we'll pay it. They put in the chip things, and my wife said, great, going back to Target, right? Because they did the public relations correctly, and because they have cheap stuff that my wife wants to buy. Now, kind of along those lines of how it changed our underwriting, but also can we reduce your cyber insurance costs? The answer to how we can reduce your cyber insurance costs is have the controls in place that we're looking for. Beginning in 2017 to 2019, ransomware really took a significant upturn. We could get into the reasons why, but this is a 2-hour presentation that I'm trying to condense into 10 minutes. That's why I'm speaking very quickly. But the chip on your credit card plus the rise of Bitcoin made it easier for ransomware to take place. And because of that, ransomware really took off in that time frame from 17 to 19, caused a lot of insurance companies to pay a lot of money on ransoms, and it caused the underwriting to go from, do you have a pulse? Yes, we can give you a policy, to we need a lot of controls in place in order to make sure that you actually are doing the baseline. So property insurance has been around for years. Everybody has to have sprinklers in place and things like that. That's how cyber insurance has become now, is there are certain things that most companies are looking for and saying, if you don't have these in place, you are either uninsurable or we're going to reduce your coverage and charge you higher rates because you don't have these things. So things that we're often looking for now, multi-factor authentication for remote access. Everybody hopefully knows what multi-factor authentication is, but you go on your online banking and usually they'll say you have to get a text message or an email to confirm that it's you. If you don't have that set up on many things, please do. I deactivated my Facebook account in 2010 and it was hacked into last March because Facebook at that time didn't let you actually get rid of Facebook. You could only deactivate it so you could come back later. Because I didn't set up multi-factor in 2010, I don't even know if they had it, somebody gained access to it and took over my account. Now you can do multi-factor authentication. After 6 months it took me to get my account back. I went in, added multi-factor authentication, and then fully deleted the account anyway. So multi-factor authentication, very important. Not only for remote access, but web-based emails, regular backups of critical data, because ransomware often involves either erasing your data or holding it hostage. Having recent backups or good backups, regular backups, is very important. Antivirus, anti-malware, and/or endpoint protection software. Email screening for malicious attachments, so email screening that sees that the attachment that's included is malicious and prevents you from opening it. Also tagging of external emails. Any email I get at work that's not from somebody within Beazley, it will say this is coming from outside the organization. The reason for that is one of the most common ways that one of the things that we see often is we call fraudulent instruction, some people call it social engineering. Hey, this is your CEO, we need to send a payment to this vendor at the end of the day because otherwise they're not going to send our next shipment or they're going to cut off our service, whatever it may be. By the way, I'm on my boat and I don't have access to my work email, that's why I'm sending this from my personal email account, right? That becomes very common, but it's not only some sent from personal ones, but it'll also, what we'll see is somebody will create an email address at Beazle.com instead of Beazley.com, and the way our mind works, we see that and we immediately think it says Beazley because we're not paying attention. That external tagging will recognize that and say that. And then not only that, the way ours is set up is it'll say this is not somebody you get emails from regularly. So even if it's an outside partner and somebody tries to impersonate them, it'll say this isn't one that you see regularly. Why is this important? Timely installation of critical patches. Oftentimes the threat vectors that are utilized take advantage of things that could have been patched already, whether it's Microsoft or whatever software you're using, but if you don't install those regularly, those threat actors can gain access to it. And then employee training on social engineering, because again, employees are generally the weakest link. And then one of the things that used to be Ponemon, now it's IBM, puts out a report every year on data breaches. And one of the things they've reported in the last few years is that companies that have an incident response plan in place and that have actually done disaster drills and walked through the steps see a much significantly lower cost in the event of a security incident than those that don't have that in place. And again, that's because they know what processes to go through. And because it's always important to kind of know what is it that I do, because you're going to want to know, like if I do it in security, it must be important, right? Because I learn about this stuff, right? So I've changed all my passwords to Kenny. And now I have all Kenny logins. And for those of you who are below 40, I can explain that to you in the question section.
Does that mean you're still in the danger zone?
Because that's what I do in IT. So I'm actually going to go back a slide. these two just said that they don't talk about the IT stuff. That's what others are for. That's exactly what I was about to talk about. That's everything. And Jill and I late yesterday were modifying on my slides. I'm like, I'm just going to repeat everything that he just said. So why do that? So that right there is exactly what needs to be in place. MFA, across the board, backups. Backups will save you more ways than others. AV, EDR, MDR, whichever you have. Emails, just email security, whether it's spam filtering in there with good settings and everything. External tagging, that's a good step you did with the is not a normal person. That's actually a good one there. And then employee training. Employee training is definitely the root cause of a vast majority of the issues that we run into. Whether it's clicking on an email, which is the most common, or which is, we're going to get into that in a minute, or the Nigerian prince. I want to meet that guy one day. Or if the CFO sends something to the accounting team, hey, I need you to pay these in credit cards. Is that something that the CFO would normally do? If it's not, why are you doing it? Why are you paying? Why are you going to Amazon and getting, or Walmart and getting $50, $100 gift cards? They don't do that. So I'm not going to read every slide since these two really just went over everything. But really just going to point out that the cyber risks are evolving. Who has car insurance? Every single hand should be up, right? Why? Why do you have car insurance? It's a law, right? It's required to get in. You have to have that in case you get in an accident. It protects you, the other driver, the car, property, so on, so on, so on. Who does not? You don't have to raise your hand for this one. Who does not have business insurance? Who does not have cyber insurance? Why? Again, you don't have to raise your hands for that one.
Yes,
but yeah, yes. If you don't, talk to these two. Yes. Yeah. If you don't have cyber insurance, please talk to them, and they'll hook you up. So,
Before we move on,
yeah.
Can you take a second and peel back a layer of? I think a lot of companies, and mine included, which is why I'm here today, because I'm working to improve my organization's position, specifically to mitigate risk that I see that others don't. And we're fine. We've had this business insurance for years, and here's the computer and cyber clause. See, we're good. And I'm like, yeah, they're never going to pay that in a million years. And it's dim. It's confusing. It's cloudy. What's covered? What isn't? Who said we had these things in place in your slide of all the little boxes of things that we're doing now that maybe weren't done before I got there? But, who actually signed off on that policy? And I think that there's a lot of organizations that are confused and think that they have coverage and they're okay, and should bad things happen, they will have the cavalry come and help them, and that is not the case. And that trying to understand that is really one of the things I'm trying to take away today.
So when you figure that out, please let all three of us know, because that's really is a gray area. However, they can speak to more about the coverage and what's covered, not covered. From what we do as an MSP with our customers is that we will get on the line with them and talk through the agreement itself, talk through what's covered, not covered. It says you must have MFA on these accounts. What do you mean by that? Because it's vague. Dave back there, and he's one of our security engineers, we do these all the time. We look at the insurance carrier, the form itself. Do you have MFA on admin accounts? Well, we do. If there's a breach, or an incident, if there's an incident, yeah, we actually started changing that a couple months ago. We don't say breaches anymore. We try not to. If there's an incident, did it come in through MFA? But where we get caught is, well, that wasn't a question, is do you have MFA on admin accounts? So it got to that grain. I'm not picking on them, but in general, but that's what we're running into. So really defining that with the carrier and whoever's doing your IT. So if it's us, we will work with you, we'll sign off on it and saying this, we agree this is all the stuff that's in place. Here's where we're not sure of. Talk to them directly, and we'll help with that. That's what we do. If it's internal, again, you just need to talk internally with your team, with the carriers. Is this particular thing covered? What's not covered? I have no idea what you're talking about. Whatever that is, work through all that, and then they're going to tell you, this is what we want. So if an incident happens, you must have this. If you have this, you're not going to be covered, or for the most part. Did I answer your question?
It's getting there.
Yeah.
Is it Justin? I can probably help a little bit, and I bet Joe can as well. But So usually when you're going through this process, you're going to start at the most basic level, the way every single insurance process starts, with either a digital or a paper application. And so that's where you're going to set the baseline for asking and answering questions. Depending on the organizational scale, what comes next might go a lot deeper. So I know that there's carriers, and I think Beazley's probably one of them, that will literally run port scans and start pinging stuff on your network and ask for or attempt to, with a white hat on, sort of breach your network. I've got one today at 4 o'clock, as does my colleague Sarah over there. It's like a 250 or 300 seat large IT consulting firm. They're 60 days out from a renewal of a policy that we placed for them last year. And there's 3 people from the insurance company, 3 people from the, sort of C-suite, including CIO that's required on a call, myself and Sarah. So it's like a 8-person conference call where during the course of this call, they're going to be asking leadership questions. They're going to be attempting to ping things. So that can be as deep as the process goes to determine what is going on within your network and your infrastructure. Does that more specifically answer the question that you were going for?
It's on the way.
Okay.
I don't want to monopolize.
And then there's one more aspect, because I'll address this, and this may not go to another pin. So when you look at a business insurance policy that has some sort of a cyber provision on it, if you recall that slide with the continuum of what are you getting, you're on the bucket of money end of the continuum. On anything that's part of something else and is not a standalone product, you are on the lightest version of any support for this sort of thing.
And I was going to comment on that same point. And I don't know what you have, but often what we will call cyber insurance that's attached to some other policy is exclusion by inclusion, which is they don't want to cover it, so they're going to give you a tiny amount of sublimit so that they can then say, we did cover it, we paid him what we told him we were going to pay him,
right,
as opposed to a standalone policy, which might be broader. So my comment on that would be you would want to talk to an insurance professional and have them look at it and go, do you really have coverage here? Or do you have exclusion by inclusion, which is just a small supplement just to avoid those lawsuits that come later by saying, well, you didn't say I don't have it, so I must have it. And that's what happened a lot in the early days of cyber, was because people didn't, or policies didn't specifically exclude it, they would cram it through, and the court of law is usually going to agree with the consumer and not the big bad insurance company. So the insurance companies started putting exclusions on there, or they would say, yeah, we've got cyber for a small amount. So that's one where you need to speak to a licensed insurance professional who can look at it and go, oh, Joe's done something horrible to you here, you need a better policy, or say, yes, this is good, or here are the options that we can put with you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. So it's a little bit convoluted, right? I view the insurance as reactive, and then all the, what you just went over is kind of proactive, right? And there certainly is overlap in that, but generally they're 2 different things, right? So how is DP helping on the proactive side? We work specifically in the financial management space, so we just have tons and tons of data in multiple places, whether it's reporting or CRM and our cloud and Azure and all the different things. And I struggle sometimes to see, I certainly think DP is brings a ton of value to our firm, right? But the cybersecurity specifically in our industry is increasing just tenfold day by day. The SEC is going to pass new regulation.
Yep.
So it's, to me, it's like, is there dedicated stuff? Like, I love Dave. I want to work with Dave regularly. Can I talk to him? And
Dave is, when I came on board a couple years ago, we started our internal security team. We have outsourced stuff as well, but we have internal.
Right.
Dave was the first person on that team. He is one of our senior security engineers, so yes, you can talk to Dave directly. I'll get to that in just a second, but these next 4 bullet points, proactive, like you just said. The attacks are primarily on users, not technology. It says most attacks. Technology fails, it happens. But most attacks are going after users or their emails emails or relying on them doing something wrong, which is the tech risk is the technical security and behavioral. So again, doing that gift card from Amazon for the CFO, that's a behavioral thing. In risk management, again, revolutionary or evolutionary, not revolutionary. It's not game changing. It's just it's constantly evolving and everything. So how we actually do stuff, these are primary 4 things, and this is in the industry, whether it's financial, GovCon, or whichever. Patch management, which Joe touched on, getting critical updates out to the devices immediately or as soon as possible. And AV, have an EDR, MDR, Sentinel-1, CrowdStrike, Defender, whichever it is, you got to have something on your system. Otherwise, you're just straight vulnerable. And again, example in a minute. Monitoring, at DP Solutions, we have tools that are in place on all your servers, on your Azure, on your 365, on every system that you have. We have monitoring tools for that. It all reports back to a central hub, and it lets us know, oh, we need to dig into this arcade tongue thing, or we need to dig into this, or everything's green across the board. Testing and assessment. Part of that goes into the DR testing. If you have Azure servers or anything like that, we do DR testing. We also can do tabletop exercises to just test certain things, like when the regulations come out, when the SEC changes something every other day, we can adapt to those and do those different tests or anything. That's kind of where we have to roll with those, because there are so many changes happening so often across all the different industries and all the compliance requirements. It is nearly impossible to stay on top of every one of those. However, we work with partners, and we throw some things to them, we do some of the other things, but really it's just doing that assessing and testing, the assessments and testing. Assessments, one of the questions I was answered on given during registration is how often should you do assessments and vulnerabilities? At least annually? Is that what you guys require for insurance? About annually?
I don't know.
For just a review of the cyber?
So my company, or my division of the company, is the small business division.
Mm-hmm.
We don't require that, but then the large risk team has requirements that they have.
Okay. So there is no written norm what is when you need to have a cyber review or anything, but annually is good enough for the most part. If you're under any compliancy stuff, 6 months, 3 months, depends on what it is. Keep in mind, it can take a good month to do a full assessment, and it takes another month or 2 to fix everything. So if you do it every month, you're never going to finish.
So how do you arm yourself? Here's a short list of how you can make it a bit more difficult for bad actors. We have policies, phishing, testing, security awareness training, and compliance training. All of these combined into a more comprehensive just awareness of how you can fight back a little bit. Policies are the foundation of a strong security culture within an organization. They outline the rules and guidelines that must be followed to protect sensitive data as well as assets. Policies can cover a wide range of topics, including acceptable use, incident response, disaster recovery, password usage, or just general logging on, logging off of your system. Something that is often overlooked is the need to regularly review and update these policies to address new threats and technologies as they come to light. What often happens is policy be put in place 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago, and we never touch it again. It's left in a file until there's an incident, and then we go back and look at it, and then we're like, oh, this is out of date, and we're no longer, this is no longer a thing. That server's 20 years old, and we haven't had it in 15 years. So constantly reviewing the policies is critical. Policies also ensure that the employees are aware of and adhere to everything that's changing. So if there's a change in your systems that you change the line of business software or your policy, a password requirements or whatever, reviewing the policies with the staff is a way to keep them more in tune with what's going on. Phishing attacks. We've all seen these. These are one of the most common and effective methods for bad actors to gain access to your information. They usually come in through simulations, the testing is done through simulations where we act as the bad actors and we try to get you to fall for something. We want you to enter your passwords or click on a link or anything like that. Through these tests, we can educate employees about what to look out for. Does it say external? Does it have typos? Is the boss asking for 500 Amazon gift cards when the boss doesn't do that? Things like that. It's been proven to significantly reduce the risk of falling victim for phishing. Along with phishing is just regular security training, security awareness training. They go hand in hand. Security awareness training often encompasses phishing training, but sometimes they're a little bit different. This type of training is a little bit more generalized at times for just how to be on the lookout, how to have a clean desk policy so there's no passwords on your desk, or insider threat training, anything that deals with your employees doing any work to keep them secure. That's where the security awareness training comes into play. In the end, the more you and your staff are aware of security concerns, the better they can be empowered to play an active role in protecting the organization's assets and data. Finally, we have compliance training. This is also in addition to phishing and security awareness training, and ensures that employees are aware of the constant changing in laws and regulations and standards. Good example of this is, which is a hot topic, is the CMMC requirements that were released back in December that are going into effect hopefully by the end of this year. We'll know more later this year, of course, but they've been delaying those. Those are constantly undergoing changes and revisions. And once Congress approves those, the folks that are responsible for maintaining compliancy, i.e. IT departments, CIO, things like that, they have to be trained. So when they're trained, they can get you compliant and make sure everybody's compliant across the board. So putting all this in action, policies, phishing, security awareness, compliance, everything that I just covered was not in place in this real life scenario. And this is something that we are dealing with as we speak right now.
All right, so a real life example. The company's been redacted. This is this company that we're assisting with outside of stuff. They've spent the better part of 60-ish hours, 50 to 60-ish hours working on this, and it's still ongoing. So this can be hard to see, but if there's any techies in here, pointer this one.
Yeah, it doesn't work. The screen doesn't.
So what's highlighted on the bottom here is this is a Exchange 13 environment. This is, so they have an on-premises Exchange server. It's built. It is, there's no antivirus on some of these systems. Some of these systems don't have anything other than their free-for-all Wild Wild West. That script that's written on the bottom there, that is basically a 15-year-old script. I did those back in my hacking days, hacking classes and days. Used something similar to that. What that did right there is it copied data from their server to offsite to the bad guys, and it took a couple hours total to get all that data. This is the actual email that came from them. So it's hard, I can't read it or anything, but I'm going to point out a few things. So basically at the top says your corporate network is compromised. We finished duplicating sensitive data, over 1.4 terabytes of data. You all know the data size, that's a lot of data. Violations, they even put some little threat stuff in here. You're violating the ECPA, FTC Act, and a few others. Financial numbers in there, 163,000 port incidents. Now these folks had almost 5,000 emails. 5,000 times 161,000, you do the math on that. Civil penalties around here, things like that. What to do is basically give us 16 Bitcoin in like no time at all. What made this really funny though is, again, you can't see them, 1.4 terabytes of data. This is the Beazley ransomware. Came in. What made this one particular interesting is that they've been around a long time. It's actually an article of Threat Report, the top 10 ransomwares last year. Is this particular ransomware, years ago they did the lock and collect, the encrypt and collect money. They went away from that late last year. Now they're just taking your data and going to expose it. So they don't encrypt this often. And the funny thing about this, I put this one, now this is from the bad guys. You don't need to follow any suspicious links, download something from untrustworthy sources instead of playing computer. So the bad guys are telling you, you don't need to worry about trusting anybody else, you got us. All right, so what to do during an incident, and this kind of alludes to what Joe was going over, so I'm going to relates to this, is you need to have a point of contact. If it's the head of IT internally, if you have an MSP, it's not going to be us. It's going to be someone internally will work with you on that. Communication to the staff, let your staff know that something happened. Don't hide it. They're going to find out, and it's better that they know ahead of time. Or if they're called, if they get a phone call from anything, we have an incident, talk to Bob. We have an incident, talk to Bob.
That's all you got to do. You don't have to tell me any other details. Third parties, first and foremost, these guys. Get a hold of your insurance carriers. Tell them what happened. They might say, let us know what happens. They might say, we need to know right now. That incident I just showed you, we were on a call yesterday with the forensics folks and the attorneys. It's not going to end well for them, for that company. So that's how serious it is. But get your insurance carriers involved immediately. Just let them know. Focus on resolution along with your IT, internal or outsourced, your insurance carriers, forensics investigators, any of that stuff. Collectively as a team, come up with a resolution. That's the end game, is to save the data, save money, and make sure it doesn't happen again. How to recover from an incident. Kind of goes back to the proactive as well, is what happened is how they get in, how they steal your data. Do they get in through a bad patch or lack of patches? Proactive work will take care of that. Did they get in because you clicked on a link? Filtering would have caught that, or training would have caught that. Did they get in because you're using Kenny's login? That's me stuck in my house. They're welcome. It's little things like it's. Do they walk by and they see your password on a post-it note on your keyboard? Things like that. Contain the attack and assess the damage. Our biggest thing is that Dave's heard me say this, like, just stop the bleeding. It's like, I don't care if we upset a client, we have to stop the bleeding. If we go over there, RK Tongue's breached or incident, we're going to yank cables and essentially just lock them out. He's going to be upset. I'm not saying we're working on the incident right now. Here's what happened. He'll be okay. He's not going to be happy. He's going to be okay though. He'll understand why we did that. So we stop the bleeding, and then we figure out what happened, how they got in, work through those vulnerabilities. Oh, we need to run Sun1 or CrowdStrike or whatever. We run the tools and everything, we clean everything up, then we figure out how do we stop it from happening again. That gets into the, like, consider why the incident occurred. Well, we didn't have CrowdStrike on there, we didn't have Sun1 installed for whatever reason. Your risk tolerance, that's really company specific. What's your level of acceptability with that? Are you okay with your staff not getting training on how to do an email or read emails? If you are, you don't want to pay for it, then you're okay with that. If you're not, you need training. That's kind of just stuff. And staff communication and training, kind of they all kind of tie together. So your staff has to be aware of what's going on. If not, they're having a swing. So ongoing maintenance, this is a continuation. So whatever controls you have in place, whether it's we don't have training now, we're going to have training. Simple enough. We don't have a backup solution now, we're getting a backup solution. It's the beginning of the day. Vulnerability assessments and risk assessment, or testing risk assessments. We do those all the time, the vulnerability assessments where we run them on networks, we find all the loopholes, security team reviews them, and we see that, oh, we found 3 accounts that have passwords that haven't expired, they don't expire. Why does the senior admin, his password doesn't expire? Why? Well, that's a red flag. Make it expire every 90 days or whichever. We look at firewall loopholes. You have open ports, different application installed, and they open up ports. The more ports you have open on your firewall, you turn your firewall into cottage cheese, basically. So it's just bad stuff's going to get in and out. The biggest common one, that example I gave, they came in through remote desktop protocol, which is the most common. Outside of user training and emails, it's remote desktop protocol, because TeamViewer, someone mentioned TeamViewer earlier. Back then, TeamViewer was the thing. Nowadays, nobody wants to touch it because it's so vulnerable. Risk management point of contact, again, usually it's going to be your security team. If it's outsourced, then we work with you. If it's internal, usually it's your IT person or CFO or CEO. Keep equipment up to date. You have end-of-life hardware, end-of-life software, you got to spend the money. That's the gist of it. You have to spend the money. If you have to be compliant, anybody, government contractors or primaries and subs, if the new regulations coming out, you're not going to be able to have any end-of-life equipment or software. That's going to filter down to the other industries in the coming years. Just FYI. And just these are some of the tools we use. What's the big one right in the center there? We pay for that. So this is the one is 701 CrowdStrike. This is the one where if that client, customer, if they had that 701 installed, or even if they had Arctic Wolf in place, that ransomware that came through, both of them reported that they most likely would have called.
Quick disclaimer, we're not an insurance broker, we're not an insurance carrier, but I think you're going to find that we're adjacent to that in terms of it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that if something occurs like ransomware that it's binary in that you're either attacked and then everything is devastated or you're not attacked, right? So by having continuous monitoring in place, which is what we offer, we can actually eliminate those types of things, or at least keep them from getting to a disastrous point at which you need incident response. But we'll talk about that. So the fear mongering, glad I had this in here so I can jump on board. The next few slides are going to be kind of my Chicken Little slides. That's my version of fear mongering. The sky is falling. And there's really just some trends. I think there was a question that was sent in or submitted, so I figured I'd just address this directly. We've talked about ransomware. I won't go too heavy into that. I'm not even a slide reader. You'll figure that out shortly. But there are some things I think that are worthy of discussion. So supply chain attacks. This is increasing right now, so in the year 2024. So I think, Joe, you may have alluded to an IBM security threat report. There's several of us that do those. So IBM, Verizon, we do one now, so you can actually just go on our website and download it. It's free. You have to cough up some information about yourself, but whatever, you can lie, whatever. But it is an interesting read, and so it does break these down. The supply chain attacks, you might have remembered the SolarWinds attack that occurred right at the beginning of the pandemic. That was a very interesting one. It was wildly more successful than the attackers had even planned, right? So it's basically that, a large number of organizations, I think probably 60,000 plus, used SolarWinds or SolarWinds Orion. And the hackers were savvy enough to basically, instead of going after individual organizations one by one, they said, well, why don't we go after a software company that has, that all these organizations are using, right? Pretty ingenious. They checked the code in, I believe it was March of 2020. Wasn't discovered, it was actually discovered by FireEye. Got to give credit where credit's due. In December. So, we throw out a stat sometimes about latent threats, and typically if we get a greenfield customer, so a customer that is not using an Arctic Wolf service or managed detection and response, which is one of our portfolio services, we find latent threats in about 70% of those customers, and the typical time that they've been in an environment is around the average time I think is 207 days, which I thought was insane when I first joined the company 4 years ago. I'm like, there's no way, but it's true. I see some head nods, so you guys know that is actually out there. Data breach I think is also another interesting point in the sense that there's also an uptick in this just because ransomware's paying somewhat, but the data breach side is where if you take I'll just pick on somebody, Baltimore. City Baltimore, if you remember when they were attacked, and they basically just told the attackers to go pound sand, they're not going to pay the ransomware, and then all the city services were shut down for 3 to 4 weeks while they did a bare metal restore of everything. I'm not really going to pass judgment on that. I mean, that's one way to go, but certainly there was consequences in terms of the folks that live in the city. But now, especially with SEC compliance, there's a whole level of magnitude that's going into that as well. And then finally, not going to get political, but certainly who's doing this and why. It's the usual suspects. You could probably name them: China, Iran, North Korea, Russia. So I have some crispy news slides here, the next two, that just kind of talk about that. So not sure if you know, but the most likely type of compromise that you're going to hit or may hit would be what we call BEC. Cybersecurity is super heavy in acronyms, as you know. I came from doing infrastructure, so the reason I'm less of a bozo now on cybersecurity is because I just memorized a bunch of acronyms. So anything that I read off to you as an acronym, please stop me if you need an explanation. It's nothing that makes us better than anybody else. We just memorized all this stuff. Anyway, so under the umbrella of business email compromise, the root cause of these other incidents are going to be a couple things. And I love that we share the same terminology. I've never sat in a Beazley conversation, so we use the same terms. It's actually nice to hear. So I know that our marketing team actually knows what they're talking about too. But external exposure, a lot of those are again, like those RDP sessions are open. A lot of folks in technology will try to do things out of convenience, which usually means that security takes a back seat. As you can see, 70% of the root causes, and I should actually pause too and say that these are all numbers just from our customer base, right? So what is our customer base? We're a little over 5,000 customers in the commercial, as you might call it, SMB space, up to enterprise. That's certainly our sweet spot, that area. I'm teamed up with Steve Walling. I think he just left the room, probably afraid of what I'm going to say. We cover those accounts in the Maryland and the DC area. The second one is user action, in terms of keeping your entire employee base vigilant, right? And that can be accomplished through security training primarily, and then also through some of the services that Article provides. The other two are just kind of ancillary, trusted relationship. Again, that's where that supply chain comes in. And then the final one would be insider threat. I think a lot of folks, even our own Adam Ari, who's our CISO, came from being an employee of the FBI. That's his actually primary concern. So just another way to look at this illustratively, in terms of if it's not a business, not just a traditional business email compromise, what are they coming from? I'll just call attention to a couple highlights here. So are y'all familiar with the term 0 day? 0 days, so just incident that hadn't been seen before in the wild, essentially, is what that is. Really, it doesn't account for it. To me, it was a little bit of a surprise. It's not as high as you would think it would be. 3.4% out of the external exposures. But again, look at that external remote access. That's about 40%. So again, it's those RDP sessions and what was the other goofy team? Not teams. Team viewer. Teams is just as bad. They're out there, and then 24% are from the trusted relationship. I think the highlight that I wanted to call it there too is social engineering, 1.8%. Don't have to look too far back into history. MGM, Caesars, Uber, all compromised in the last 12 months or so, give or take, if you will, based on that. And that, by the way, is going to have a significant uptick. If you think about AI, we're all getting our toes wet or more in the pool on that one. But what they're starting to do is close that gap between, things like if somebody were to call me and say, hey, big guy, I'm in the data center, I deleted my password, or I deleted my account, can I just borrow one from you? And it's like, as humans, well, who would call me big guy? It must be my buddy, Now they're going to be, savvy enough to be able to use AI and potentially compromise me in that sense. Our tagline is to end cyber risk. It's kind of a lofty goal, perhaps a little ridiculous, but roll with me on that one. What a service is, to us, at least from our perspective, it's really a combination of two things, right? It's getting you out of the business of having to go out and evaluate a suite of products, right? So that could be to cover your cloud infrastructure, to cover your endpoints, your firewalls, all that good stuff. I mean, there's literally thousands of products that are out there. I think as of 2022, there was something like a $2.1 or $2.9 billion spend. I mean, that's a lot of money. There's a lot of products, but operationally, we're not seeing less attacks. They're going up. So there's a problem, right? And Article from the very beginning decided instead of addressing that by just having another product that's out there, like Me Too, that we would just provide it as a service. So the technology portion is all our own. In a way to kind of just sum up what we do in general would be SOC as a service. So everything that you would need to basically run a fully operational SOC 24/7. And then the secondary part of that is the talent, right? So the people. So services are just simply people and products together to oversimplify. In our terms, we use this notion of a concierge delivery model. I know, fancy term, fancy hotel type of thing. Doesn't mean you're at the Ferrari dealership with that one. What it means specifically is you get 3 named advisors. Really, DP Solutions gets those 3 named advisors. But it's a bi-directional type of communication, and it's one where we build history and rapport that's bespoke, individualized for every single one of our customers, right? So, if you take our 5,000 customers, We cover about 35 different industries, 5 to 7 primary ones, whether it's legal, healthcare, finance, manufacturing, retail, SLED. Those are our primaries. And we assign those folks kind of based on the industry. So for example, if you need to pull a CMMC report, or you need a HIPAA report or a PII report, we can help you with that. And the first thing you don't hear is, what's HIPAA? We want to make sure that we're coordinated on that front. So again, to align on the terminology, risk mitigation, really we believe that with those two pieces, that service model, we cover about 90% of that. And then the last 10% is again using what we call risk transfer. We share that terminology like that. We provide a warranty. We'll get into some of those details at the very end here, and then also the insurance. So this is where we become partnered together with your cybersecurity insurance and then a monitoring service as well to make sure you hopefully don't have to use that insurance. This might look familiar. I could just breeze right through this. I think this has been in all of our presentations, which is great. I like that. The way that you don't have to pay as high a premiums can be offset by having a service like this in place. And I think, since there's not, more than I would say a good dozen of us that are kind of in this space, in our peer group, if you will, to Arctic Wolf, we've got some name recognition. We've amassed that at this point. So like with Beazley, I would venture to say if you have a customer and you know that they're back-ended with Arctic Wolf, you have a certain peace of mind knowing that several of these things, these controls, are going to be in place already for you. So that's helpful. To kind of focus a little bit more on what the Arctic Wolf piece is. Okay, good. In the business we call it left of boom and right of boom, boom being an incident. And so, left of boom, what we supply is 24/7, eyes on glass. Again, through that concierge delivery model, we're basically able to not only look at, all the different possible trajectories that a threat actor could take, whether they try to subvert through social engineering, whether they try to compromise an endpoint, go through the firewall, all that good stuff. It's just having people to even start looking at that stuff all day long and augment where you may not have that staff to do that. And one of the other nice things about our story is this holistic vendor approach. So our idea is that not only is it SOC as a service, it's a turnkey solution, but we want to have time to value pretty fast. So working with whatever vendors you have in place. So for example, if you're already a CrowdStrike customer or SentinelOne customer, that's okay. We don't have to do a lift and shift and move everything to Arctic Wolf, that type of thing. And then on the post-incident side, now again, our goal is to basically reduce the impact of an incident should it occur, right? So just because ransomware may start and it may affect one machine, having active monitoring like ours in place can stop that. That's where this isn't binary between like no disaster, full disaster. There is an in-between, and that's kind of what the monitoring service is there to help do. Let's see, so I'll move it along pretty fast. Just another visual. I always show this in the beginning of our presentations when we're just talking about the technology. The story here is you should have broad visibility, so coverage across all these things. Now, a lot of these pieces, whether it's like what you have in Azure or what you have on endpoints, there's great security tools, again, products for that. The idea here is that instead of having you or DP Solutions have to pivot between each one of those tools and thread all the breadcrumbs together and figure out what's going on, we perform that through a combination of AI and then our own teams, and then kind of distill that down and provide that information vis-a-vis would go back to you as well on that. So, kind of a summary on this one as well. Steve and I do discovery on a call. They notoriously go the same way. We just ask kind of just simple questions like, hey, give me an idea of your security team. How do you feel about, your setup? How many people are on your team? And a lot of times the answer is, you're talking to them. I mean, okay, well, we've got a one-person security team. You definitely can't cover 24 by 7 by 365, and so we can provide that. Again, more like a timeshare where as a service, you're not having to pay for 3 different employees. For example, we kind of show these costs here, or to build this all out yourself, right? So, do it yourself is kind of one of our competitors, if you will, out there where people go out and you may not even know all the things you have to go get, like a SIM and staff to write rules for the SIM, and then you got to build all the ingestion and then you got to get your threat intel from somewhere. So you kind of eliminate all that with us. Again, we've got some stats here: reduced incident likelihood by 90% or downtime by 97%. Again, that's all through just active monitoring and having our 24/7 staff. And I'm probably running out of time, so let's see. Warranty and insurance. So one cool thing about Arctic Wolf is we have a security operations warranty behind the scenes, so that can be very helpful. And it can help with the right side of the picture there. So what we're talking about is, you may have a $100,000 deductible or something like that. I'm not sure what's typical, but you could fully raise that to the amount of the warranty that we provide. So there are some asterisks and small bullet items about qualification for the warranty. Really what it means is paying for multiple services, so you get the vulnerability management and the MDR. Get into that another time. But essentially with that warranty, it keeps you from having to escrow the deductible, so you don't have to keep that money on the books. That could be covered by our warranty. And obviously with a higher, it just works just like auto insurance, a higher deductible can lead to potentially lower premiums. I don't want to go so far to say that because we're not a carrier, as we said at the beginning, but whatever. You can tell I just say whatever I feel like. One last thing, and then I'm done. So I don't do a good enough job mentioning this, but I think this is fairly important. I hate to be a little bit morbid, but the closest analogy to this would be like a will. Okay, so we have this thing, we call it an IR jumpstart retainer, and really what it's all about is it's a very small amount of money. I'm in text, so I don't have to tell you how much it is, but it's a very small amount. And really what it does is it allows us to sit down with you and do some planning, because there's some things that you probably didn't think that you needed to think about, just like a will, and we'll step you through all that stuff, and you get some kind of nice things that come out of that. If the proverbial S were to hit the fan and you had to go all the way to incident response, now, pause on that for a second. If you're using Arctic Wolf, it should never have to get to that point, but we're not so silly to not allow for that. And we do have an arm that does that. Beazley will sometimes call us for non-Arctic Wolf customers for it. So what do you get by doing this jumpstart? Well, you go through the thought process of who am I going to call, what things need to be stood up first, what's important. So we provide all that plan, or at least ask the question so you're thinking about that. And then we have some nice things that fall out of that. One is that if you ever do end up in this situation, we have a 1-hour response time. We'll give you a quote. We don't have a fixed firm price on IR per se, and we also have a reduced hourly rate. So you may have no idea how much these types of things cost, but if you're off the street, and you're in a jam and you need incident response, well, guess what your pricing is? Sky high, right? Where else are you going to go? You're going to pay whatever it costs, and sometimes that could be $700, $1,000 an hour, that type of thing. So if you have bought this, again, not very much money. Even if you don't even buy our services, you get a reduced rate. I think it's $295 an hour. It's capped, and there's no minimum spend on that. So, another consideration, at least I would say at the minimum, do this, right? And then nothing else. And then MDR would be kind of the next step behind that. So,
just to shed some color on that, a lot of our customers that aren't MDR customers today go with our IR retainer, and it's $5,000. So it's $5,000 to have a plan if something should go wrong. So it's not like a lot of those other vendors out there that require, hey, we need $40,000, and if something doesn't go right, or if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So this is $5,000. You get all that preferred 1-hour response time should something happen. So.
Yeah, that's a great deal.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
That includes incident response,
Yep.
okay, creation and.
So that includes getting through the whole plan, having a complimentary call, then if something should go wrong, you have a 1-hour response time, and then it's a $295 rate. Typically, it's over $800 an hour, so we lock into that $295 rate. So it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right?
So if you don't do the MDR services, which I'm sure is the exclusive, like it's watching kind of behind the background and stuff like that. Because I feel like we actually got a quote and it was high for what we were at the time. But I think cyber's becoming, it's like, do you want a CIO or do you want something running in the background? That's kind of what it's looking at. But so even if you don't do MDR, you're saying you can lock in.
You can still lock in. We'll hop on a call with you. We'll get the network we'll get your network diagram. So if something should go wrong, you call us, and we already have everything planned.